Great to see everybody. Awesome job for the band. I can't wait to see and actually Canadian as well, so very nice. Go Canada. But I'm actually from the good part, the west side, not the east side. We can talk about that later. So quick introduction to myself. Where's Joe Fuka? I'm the other CEO, Chief Ecosystems Officer. So I joined Reputation last September, and my job is to help build and expand our partner ecosystem. As a company like Reputation starts to get to the size that we are, and the complexity of our product sets, and you saw what Phil and Pranav went through just in the last session, we are starting to get a tremendous amount of capabilities in our product. But what that also lends is for us to build the ecosystem around that, because as you start to look at how you deploy those solutions within your organization, the integrations that you need to do, an ecosystem makes sense. So that's where I've joined the company. We've started to do a lot of work on that. I'm starting to build a team around on top of what we had in place, and we're starting to see some great things happening. But what I want to do first is give a special thanks to our sponsors today. We have 4 of our partners sponsoring, so it's LeapPoint, Google, JD Power, and Unite Digital. So please join me in just giving a quick round of applause for their support. Okay, so we have about 40 minutes or so. We're right before lunch, so we'll keep it quick because I know we've got a great lunch starting outside. But I'm going to run just through a couple of announcements, and then we have one of our partners, LeapPoint. They're going to be doing a session, really interesting session, on cookieless data and what that means to marketing organizations as we go forward, and how first-party data becomes a lot more important as third-party data becomes a little bit more difficult to access and use. And then we'll have a panel where I'll have LeapPoint and JD Power, and we're going to talk to them a little bit about how they work with their customers. And it's really interesting because we have LeapPoint that's very focused on marketing organizations, and JD Power that does a lot of traditional work with CX groups. So we'll talk to them a little bit about how they work with their customers, and when they think about a platform like Reputation, incorporating that into some of the services that they work with their customers. So next thing that I'm very excited to announce is this morning we launched Rep Network. This is a monumental thing for our company, and I want to give a special shout out to Sandy Runner over here, who heads up our partner marketing. A whole bunch of work went into this over the last few months. And as I mentioned earlier, as we're at the size that we are with our company, building an ecosystem and putting structure around it is very important to us. So there's a lot of things that we'll be working with our partners. We'll be looking at bringing in some new partners. Our focus is really around digital agencies, systems integrators and consulting companies, but then also tech partners. We have a lot of inbound integrations into our platform. A lot of you see that in the different reviews and different data that we bring in, but we really haven't focused too much on outbound integrations. And so one of the things that my team is working on very aggressively is what we're doing with some of the bigger players in that space. So over the next 1 to 2 months, you'll see announcements of what we're working on with Google, Microsoft, and Adobe. Some very interesting use cases that'll help drive some different value propositions within your organization based on reputation. We want your feedback. So we're a feedback company asking for feedback. So what I'd like everyone to do, and this is just one quick task, one quick action that I'd like you to do. Out in our foyer, out in the partner pavilion, at the Rep Network booth, there's a wall that has all of the different components in our product. And we'd like everybody to there's a Post-it note out there, and we'd like everyone to talk about what integrations you do have. So if you're integrating reviews into something, or integrating into Salesforce or to Adobe or wherever, please go out and fill that out. Or if there's something you'd like us to integrate, because that's really good. Just like we like to listen, like you like to listen to your customers, we want to listen to our customers on what type of reviews we should be using. So, integration. So if you could please fill that out, we'd really like that to happen. Okay, now what I'd like to do is introduce Paul Self from LeapPoint. He's the Chief Strategy Officer of LeapPoint. And LeapPoint is a full-service systems integrator that focuses a lot on marketing transformation solutions. And so if you could come up on the stage, and Paul's going to walk us through that presentation around what does the world of cookieless data look like. So Paul.
Thanks, Brent. Thank you guys very much for allowing me the opportunity to be here today. It's interesting, so Nick DiBenedetto, our CEO, was supposed to be doing this presentation and came down with COVID. So I'm super thankful to be here. I was a little less thankful yesterday morning when he called me and asked me to hop on a plane, but I can't imagine after yesterday and today being anywhere else. So let's get this thing moving. So over the last decade, we've created and refined the framework for connecting work, technology, and talent, all with the goal of driving powerful marketing and sales experiences with speed, scale, and segmentation. It's through this framework that we deliver strategic advisory services that help organizations react to sentiment data, provide innovative configurations and integrations of sales and marketing technologies, and deliver on the promise of digital transformation that provides outcomes that matter. So we're fortunate to have a terrific set of customers with some of the most recognized brands in the world, spanning more than 20 industries. It's our experience with these brands that drove the development of our connected work framework. It's also led to a lot of recognition from our customers, our partners, and employees inside of our own organization. We're incredibly grateful and fortunate to be in this situation, and the reason that I'm leading with this today is because it's this trust across the ecosystem that has given us some very valuable insights. Today I want to share with you one of those insights that's in fact a top 5 concerns for our customer base today. The good news is, whether you know it or not, as a reputation customer, you're actually already working towards a solution. So it all starts with data ownership. 9 out of 10 of us believe that data privacy is a right, not a privilege. And today, through the use of third-party cookies and web tracking software, our data is being captured. And until recently, it happened whether we liked it or not. But that's changing. We're now faced with new privacy laws. Google is getting rid of cookies on Chrome. Apple has already done this with Safari. The world is changing, and the landscape is shifting. So, as marketers, we're now faced with how to go to market without access to this third-party cookie data. And today, even with all the challenges we deal with inside of our marketing organizations, 41% identify reacting to a world without third-party cookies as their #1 concern. And we actually expect this statistic to grow dramatically over the next 6 months as organizations become more aware. So what do we do when this data goes away? So it's no longer going to be easily accessible, and we can't rely on the old tactics to buy the data. So the good news is we can take action. Many of us are willing to share our data as long as we consent, as long as we feel control over providing that access. That means if you can create compelling experiences, compelling content, webinars, surveys, you can earn the right to my data. When consumers consent to share their information, we get what's called first-party data. Initially, media coverage around third-party versus first-party data centered around things like legal concerns with lots of topics around GDPR. That was the primary coverage. But as a cookieless future becomes a reality, the narrative's shifting. It's not just a legal concern, it's about trust. It's like a conversation with a good friend. You have that conversation because they're positive. You likely add value to that relationship. And most importantly, they trust you. And this is where reputation comes in. Through Reputation's platform, you're creating positive, valuable, and trusted conversations with your consumers. You may be focusing on brand and customer experience, which is great, but now you have the added benefit of the first-party data that you receive. Okay, so great. Now I'm thinking about reputation a little bit differently. It has even more value than what I originally thought. But what do I do with that first-party data? You can use that data to enrich a customer data profile. And as you collect more, you can begin to unify profiles and perform cohort and lookalike analysis. Reputation data can help inform this unified profile of the customer. So we move from CDP to a unified profile to actually contextual marketing, so that we're delivering personalized messages to our consumers, not only personalized, but at the point in time that they need them. Because the contextual marketing is about more than just the personalized message we deliver. It's about getting it to them at the right time. So, as a result of these shifts, we may have less data, but that data will be highly tuned. It enables us to be more effective and hyper-personalize our messages and experiences, truly driving to the next best action. Reputation with its algorithm provides a very actionable, holistic reputation score that it's a simple trigger for our next best action and enables us to deliver on the brand promise. So this isn't just the art of the possible. We're actually working with clients today. So I'm going to step through a real-world example. Step one, through the use of Reputation's platform, you're collecting first-party and sentiment data. The more products you own, the more data you'll have. Step 2, 3, and 4, you're integrating this data into your customer data platform and unifying your customer data profiles, finding ways to do segmentation. And then finally, step 5 and 6, you're able to activate marketing. So take this newly unified customer data profile, use it to activate marketing for demand generation, customer journey, and personalization at scale. So, as that may feel a bit complex, there are 3 steps we can do today to start moving in the right direction. First, identify all of the first-party data you collect today and develop a plan to determine if it's sufficient or if new solutions are required. Ensure we're not missing opportunities to capture customer intelligence. Second, as first-party data exists throughout your organization, connect those teams across marketing and customer experience. And then finally, use that information to activate marketing and sales. And the final step, come speak with us today. We can help turn this vision into a reality. And if you don't get the chance to speak with us today, scan the QR code to be connected with us on LinkedIn or shoot us an email. We want to engage with you as you start this journey to better utilizing customer sentiment data and activating marketing. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Brent?
Great topic when you think about the importance of first-party data. And I think Paul made a good point. All of you that are reputation users, especially those that are in the marketing side of the house, the more that you use of our products, and I'm doing a little bit of upsell pitch here, but the more sites that, or more listening posts that you pull into our platform, and the better that you're making that data, you're actually supercharging some of the sentiment data that then can get pushed into CDPs and used in more top-of-the-funnel activities. Quick show of hands, who in the audience has sort of ventured into sentiment data into your CDP? Oh, okay, great opportunity. We do have some customers that we are working with this, and as well as some of our technology partners, so definitely something that's coming up and has a tremendous amount of value, because our data and that profiles that you have will drive what you're looking at from a marketing optimization standpoint. So with that, I'd like to bring on Chris Hodges to the stage from JD Power, and we're going to start a short panel discussion on how LeapPoint and JD Power work with their customers, and when they start to think about using a platform like Reputation, and we're going to talk a little bit about maturity curves. So Chris Hodges, please join us. So we've had the introduction to Paul. Chris, so J.D. Power, you know, everybody has probably a different view of J.D. Power. I was telling Chris the other day when we were doing some prep for this session, I was getting on an airplane and I fly Delta, and now Delta has a big J.D. Power logo on the side of the airplane. So obviously J.D. Power is in a lot of different areas. So maybe talk a little bit about your group and what J.D. Power does from a CX standpoint.
Sure, thanks Brent. J.D. Power, how many have seen our trophies out there somewhere? Okay, yeah, that's probably what's most recognizable about the J.D. Power brand is our trophies, but we do a lot. We don't just work in automotive, as Brent mentioned, we work in airlines, financial institutions, banks, insurance, utilities, all across the spectrum from a industry perspective. We do surveys, but we also spend a lot of time in data and analytics, looking at automotive data and things that drive automotive quality, automotive sales, service, how to build cars, better cars, residual values. So many topics there, as well as obviously the surveys and research that we do across industries to benchmark brands and tell them how they're ranking against their competitive set and how they can improve.
Okay, good. Well, we're a little bit ahead on the slide, but I'll leave that up. This kind of leads into my first question to Paul and to Chris. So in the session earlier, we talked a lot about what we do around pulling all of our data in. And so we have a very, very strong technology platform. And the really unique thing about the Reputation platform is we service two different groups inside of an organization, marketing group and the more traditional customer experience group. Very few platforms really cross functions like that. But one of the things that I've learned in my experience, and I think there's probably in the audience as well, is that a lot of times when you get a big, sophisticated platform like that we have, getting people to really embrace it inside the organization comes down to people and process. So a lot of times, there's a term out there that it's used sort of a people and process lag when you're implementing technology. So I guess a show of hands, who in the organization has deployed a technology at some time where you get a bit of people and process lag? Yeah, everyone's gone down that path. And so that's part of, as I said earlier, is we're building out our ecosystem of partners. We're bringing in partners that really understand and are subject matter experts in these different spaces. So Chris, maybe walk through a little bit of when you approach a customer. We did see a maturity curve slide, so if we can maybe get that popped back up again. How does J.D. Power approach a CX organization when you think about a platform like Reputation that has a tremendous amount of capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely, Brent. You asked what my group does. So I'm responsible for a group called CX Solutions, and so it's about a 50-person team across the U.S. and Canada. And we support our clients in their CX program strategy, setup of platforms like Reputation, and get them set up, design the programs, the surveys, the studies, and what they're doing, the social listening and reviews, and then running those programs for them on behalf of our clients. But a lot of times where we start the discussion with our clients is around our CX maturity model. And this is just a very high-level view of that. There's a lot more detail behind this as far as each of the stages and phases of that, but really 5 levels. And it's a starting point for conversation of, where are you at? Some clients may do some pieces of certain levels and not others, but it starts on the left-hand side. Stage 1 is basic measurement. You see this a lot where there's maybe siloed, like we're doing surveys, but it's very siloed in the organization. It's not really connected or coordinated. Second phase, moving into coordinated reporting, where you're starting to bring some of those silos together, maybe in a data warehouse or data repository where you can start to connect the data sources. Moving into unified vision, and this is where you start to see the establishment of CX leadership within the organization, a theme around CX and the importance of it within the org and throughout the org. You start to look at how do we connect employees, starting to look at that in employees, but then it's look at what channels are you measuring, right? Pranav and Phil talked earlier about unsolicited versus solicited, private versus unprivate, right? You're looking at all of those different sources of feedback that you can capture, and then being very strategic about which channels in which you capture those in, and making sure that you can actually link those sources together so that the organization can use them. And then from there, you get into behavior change, stage 4, which is now you've got all that data, now you can empower employees, you can start to look at how does EX impact CX, and then, because obviously if you don't have the employees bought in and have access to the measurements and the metrics that are important, they can't really deliver on the promise, the brand promise, and the customer experience. And then it just becomes, in the 5th stage of maturity, a way of life. You're living and breathing CX. This is just what you do. This is how you make decisions. This is how you go into new products. This is how you make decisions for your employee base and your customers alike.
Okay, great. Now, as you're working with some of the, just to follow on, as you're working, you mentioned a little bit earlier about, public data, review data, social data. Are you seeing more and more of that being incorporated into your programs? Because we still do see some RFPs coming in that it's not talked about yet. So
Yep.
where are you seeing kind of the maturity of organizations really using this kind of the social side, the public side, alongside of the survey data?
It's a great question. I mean, I think some customers, some of our clients are there, but I would say it's still the minority. I mean, a lot of times we see siloed parts of that, like you will look at either a social or reputation that's maybe coming more out of the marketing organization versus, CX is coming out of, either the customer experience organization or the research organization or some other part, and there's not necessarily that linkage that's happening between the two divisions within the company. So it's just really depends on the industry, the client, where they're at. I mean, sometimes we're trying to drag clients kicking and screaming. I would say less often they're already there and they're asking for it in that combined fashion. But I mean, Joe mentioned earlier, he was making some jokes around mail and phone surveys. I mean, we still talk to clients out there that are 100% paper-based mail surveys. They're trying to get off. I mean, we're not even talking to them about email and email capture. It's like, well, you have an opportunity now to leapfrog, right, and just start where some of the best practices and leading capabilities are, and looking at social and feedback and SMS and other channels.
Well, and the great thing, a platform like Reputation, as I mentioned earlier, that potentially can sit in those two organizations, it's a great facilitator for that change management process, because historically they've been in different systems, so it kind of kept them in the different silos. So. Paul, switching over to you, as your Leap Point's coming at the market from a different perspective, you work a lot with marketing organizations on digital transformation opportunities there. What are some of the things, and maybe walk through, I think you've got a maturity curve slide as too, sort of walk through how you talk with marketing organizations around sort of the maturity, and then when they think about sentiment data.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So if you want to throw
Yep.
there we go. Our maturity model, it's really more of a framework. And we oftentimes, especially given the proliferation of SaaS technologies over the course of the last 5 to 10 years, enter into these engagements around the technology. As a technology decision is being made, or is about to be made, or has just been made. But we develop the framework in a way that allows us to land at any place within this journey, and then make sure that we align strategy with the desired outcomes of the organization. So we typically ask 4 big questions when we come into an organization, especially if we're landing during a technology implementation, configuration, or integration phase of their project. So the first one is, what does success look like for your organization? And the reason we ask this question is because when we talk about things like the customer journey, that customer journey touches multiple parts of the organization. So more often than not, we find we don't get the same answer from each part of the organization. So we're looking to drive to alignment. So the second question, what do you need in order to achieve your goals? Again, it's an alignment question, but it's also about what's needed to enable lasting change. So third, how will you know when you've been successful? our definition of success is not the same in question 1, then our measures of that success will certainly not be the same here. And then what behaviors and activities will lead to your desired outcomes? So this allows us to surface gaps across the organization between how the reliance different parts of the organization have on each other. So, for example, a customer experience organization may look very differently about what they need from marketing than the way marketing sees it. More often than not, marketing is very, very focused on customer acquisition activities, while as the customer experience team needs enablement and content and programs around how do I retain and grow my customer base. So it's identifying and surfacing those differences and not just focusing solely on the technology, but allowing us to walk the journey to true consumer and customer intelligence.
Okay, great. That's a really good model that you've walked through. And I think for anyone in the audience, you're probably looking at that and saying, we might be at different spots. But I think I love the framework approach because, and also when you're talking about sort of when you said, what are the goals? And we probably see, our customers see this too. You get different feedback from different people in the organization. So how do you make sure you got everybody, on the right path for what the goals are? So this leads into my next question. Maturity curve or taking a customer through, whether it's a large CX initiative, voice of the customer, or Paul, as you're working through, marketing transformation, those can be fairly long processes. What are a couple quick tips that somebody could, from a CX standpoint, when they start to think about, they look at your maturity curve and they say, well, I might be on step 3, or what are some of the things that they can focus on today to try to make a change in what they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first, where it starts, the first stage starts with awareness, right? So where are you? You got to, benchmark somewhere. You got to start somewhere. Obviously, I think if most of the people here are measuring or collecting feedback in some form or fashion. So I think start measuring, start with some metric, start with some benchmark and competitive set where you can build upon that. So that would be, step 1. Just taking a pulse, taking measurement. One of the things during COVID that I did with my team is everybody started working remote. We have an employee survey, but that really happens once a year, and then quarterly updates and things like that. I started doing pulse surveys with my team just to get feedback immediately of how their lives have changed, what are their working models and adaptivity. So I think it's just important to get something started, even if it's just a pulse survey, to kind of get a baseline of where things are at within the org and with your customers. I'd say number 2 is don't do that and don't measure and don't collect feedback if you have no plans of actually responding or actioning that feedback. There are so many organizations. I guess maybe a show of hands in the audience, how many of you have taken the time to submit a survey or feedback item and you're very passionate about it because you had maybe a very poor experience? Maybe your guitar got broken on an airline. Yeah. And the customer never, or the company never responded to your feedback.
We all had that. Yeah,
so I mean that's like beyond frustrating, right? And especially when Paul's talking about the removal of third-party data and moving to more of a first-party connection. You need to respond to that feedback, positive, negative. As you probably get from reputation best practices, right? Even when people say, "Hey, you did a great job on this," acknowledging that customer, say, "I heard you, I'm listening," right? Because that establishes that relationship, it establishes trust, it builds loyalty, retention. And then I'd say the third point is really pick tech platforms that can grow and expand with your business, that have the ability and flexibility to capture feedback from across various different channels, that solicited and unsolicited feedback, and then also private and public channels as well. I think that's really important because what's been proven is that a very strong CX strategy will lead to increased revenues, increased retention, and profitability, and lower acquisition costs for new customers.
Yeah. That's a great answer. And we're starting, you mentioned sort of that correlation between a good CX program and increased productivity. We're starting to see more and more of our customers from an ROI perspective, taking data out of our platform and into, potentially a Power BI or a Tableau, and then correlating that with sales performance, location performance, and starting to see a very, very strong correlation. And that really helps from an ROI perspective to convince the CFO and the CEO to continue investing in the program as well. And I'm sure you work with a lot of your clients on ROI as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there was mention in a session yesterday with if you have a CX strategy and it doesn't have financial numbers baked into there somewhere, it's a matter of time before that program's going to get shut down.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, switch over to you. We mentioned in your presentation, you talked about sort of first-party data going into CDPs. We're seeing more and more of that coming back from some of our customers and also in some of the RFPs that we're getting brought into some large enterprise customers, and sort of this concept of enriching a CDP. That's, as we saw from the audit, it's a new concept. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that, if customers in the room want to take back from this, of how can I start that? Like where would I start in that process?
Yeah, so it's interesting because this concept of enriching our CDP data is such a new thing for organizations. It's easier just to think about it as it's audience activation. It's finding new ways to engage with customers across our channels. So you don't have to boil the ocean. You can start with certain parts of customer sentiment data, even if it's not related to competitive intelligence, but your own product mix. So we can use that information to very precisely target customers. And instead of sending progressive emails 3 to 4 times that essentially annoy and destroy trust for your customer, you can actually target them with the right information. And so here's an example of using this CDP information that came from first-party data. So we work with a wealth management firm, and one of the things that they're trying to solve for are retiring workforces and people changing locations and moving all about the country. Well, they've got local kind of regional branches and offices, so there's a personal preference change that takes place when someone moves from one location to the other. Well, that personal preference change triggers the potential for us to do something with them. So when they move from Boston to Houston, we can now send them an email and say, hey, here's your local branch, here's your point of contact, and we can continue to engage with them in meaningful ways. So that's a real-world example of taking some of that first-party data, it's resident within the CDP, and then activating audience engagement around it.
Okay, great. And I guess, we're getting close to the time here, but I think if anybody has any questions on that or sort of intrigued by, what can I do with my sentiment data to potentially, as we, enriching a CDP and then starting to pull that back up into more of customer activation, customer marketing campaigns, personalization. When you think about marketing, one of the things that everyone's trying to solve is how do I get better at my personalization? So obviously our data can really help in that. So Paul will be here. It'd be great if you have any questions, ask him as well. But I want to thank you for joining the panel today, and for our customers, again, 2 examples of some partners that we're starting to get more engaged with, activate. You can see their knowledge in their different areas. So again, just as we build out our ecosystem, really we're building out our ecosystem to help our customers. So you can start to find higher order value with reputation data and reputation platform. So I want to thank you again for joining us. And for the rest of us, I think we are off.
All right, let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Brent. Nice to see you again.